Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're with Kenneth White today, the Executive Director of the Marshall Plan for Cities. We're also with Teddy McClendon from McClendonReport.com. We are in the thick of a discussion about money, about finance, about commerce. Mr. White, let's talk about this nickel thing and this $14 million concept that you've originated.
You know, it's interesting that you should bring that up, because if you take a look at the document before you, and for those viewers here, just to mention, elaborate about this. If someone were to approach you and say, for 5 cents a day, you can begin to create jobs. You can begin to contribute to a mechanism that can make a community self-sustaining.
Okay.
They probably say, okay, 5 cents, I'll buy that.
It's a nickel.
Now, if you turned around and told them that that 5 cents will add up to $1 million, they would be surprised. And what sparked this originated from me mentioning to people, hey, we can open this business for $1 million. It's like, well, good luck. Find someone that has $1 million. So then we began to look at this. How can we make it palatable to the listeners, to the potential investors? So we take this $1 million, let's divide it into 250 groups. Now let's take that 250 groups and say there's an average of 200 individuals. Could be a church, could be a sorority, could be a neighborhood block club for all that matters.
Right.
But if you take 250 groups averaging 200 each in the size, and they each contribute a nickel a day for 1 year, that's $1 million.
That's amazing.
$1 million. And you can invest that into a business using equity share, because you're pooling your monies together, into a business debt-free.
Okay, compare and contrast then. We got to get to the heart of the matter, because I respect and admire these figures, okay? And I'm going to bring it to the real world. We all know that a lot of foreigners enter the United States, and they do just what you're saying. They do that pooling of resources and pooling of efforts to make something that will benefit many. Okay, but the key issue there is they must entrust one business or one individual to be the custodian of these pooled dollars and these pooled resources. So I find that very problematic, especially in the black community, making that happen, even though we know that other foreigners employ that daily as we speak indeed. Do you want to speak a little bit to the problem of making that happen, and how could we perhaps start what kind of pilot group could maybe start something like that?
Well, I think one of the things that will make it happen is we need to approach it from an educational perspective. And it's not more so talking at a potential student, looking at it as the educator and the student. It's embracing an individual to the point where they understand what you're saying. They hear what you're saying. You hear what they're saying. To bring it home, basically, there are certain criteria that have to be earned in order to trust someone with your finances.
Right.
And if we're talking a nickel a day, and I don't want to be aloof to the 14 million that you mentioned, but if we're talking a nickel a day in 1 quarter, in 3 months' time, take the gamble and see, do you see, you know, we take a gamble every day, and from the choices that we make.
Yes.
If I go this way, then I don't have to do this, but then I miss out on that.
Right. Opportunity.
So it's a gamble.
Costs, yes.
So what we're doing is finding a dollar amount that's palatable. That, in other words, it's not a great loss. And test it. And if you see the rubber hitting the road, in other words, if you see ground break for a real business, now you have a lot of business opportunities. There are different mechanisms for accumulating wealth by networking and so forth. And by no means do I want to demean any organization. But in this case here, take the gamble, and if you see ground break for a brand new business that's going to create X amount of jobs, sustaining wage jobs, jobs for construction workers. If you see that, we believe that it will motivate you to say, well, let's try that again. Let's try it again.
You know what? This goes right into, I'm glad you brought that up, Teddy. This goes right into the turning over of a dollar.
Oh.
And you know, not only are we dealing with a person or an entity that we trust with our dollars to help a community grow, but the turning of a dollar. I mean, it's like we don't even trust the neighborhoods that we live in. And this goes for anyone. I mean, and I love this one chart that you have in here that breaks down how much of your income are you spending outside of your neighborhood. And you list auto insurance, life, medical, your car note, clothing, food, housing, rent. And it's really interesting because even though people say they love themselves and they love their community, they're getting paid on Friday and all of those dollars are going to a suburb. And so it's really interesting. So we have to re-educate people just on spending at home.
Absolutely. Consider this. Consider going to the bank and say, I would like a $14 million loan.
Okay.
I really can't afford to pay you interest at this time.
Well, gentlemen, if either one of us did that, they'd be calling security.
Right away. Okay. Absolutely. Quick, fast, and in a hurry.
We'll go right ahead.
As we would say on the street, so to speak. But if they ask you $14 million, interest-free, they'll say you're crazy. If you told your friend, I'm going to ask for $10,000, and we all can go ask. It'll add up to $14 million, but we don't want to pay any interest. They'll think we're crazy. But yet, we loan $14 million. I believe once a week.
Explain.
Explain that now.
Explain that. Okay, good question. Let's take a look at this. I believe it's once a week, but let's just say I'm wrong. So let's stretch it to 4 weeks in a month to make this easy.
Okay, once a month.
As Garrard mentioned on here, on this economic outflow model, if you take auto insurance, life insurance, ask yourself who you're writing that check to and where's that business located.
It's usually out of state.
Where are you getting your groceries?
Different
Out of
city.
town.
Where does your landlord live if you rent?
Out of town.
Or overseas.
So here's a simple challenge to our viewing audience.
Yes.
Write the things down that you spend and add it up. If you average, let's say just 20,000 people average $700 a month that's leaving, that comes to $14 million. 20,000 people. The city of Garrard alone have a population of 102,746 with an adult population of nearly 70,000. Take out the senior citizens, you're still at 50,000 roughly. So the working adults, if we're just talking a portion, less than half, if we were spending $700 a month that's leaving the community, that's free.
So cities could,
and actually that's just giving it away, really. That one isn't the interest-free. The interest-free one, that's $19.5 million. That's a subject in itself.
so cities could not even virtually, cities could realistically create their own Wall Streets just by buying with their neighbors.
Absolutely.
But then the component creeps in of the essence of capital. See, because it will take capital in order a community to have these types of businesses that are normally patronized by the inhabitants of a city. In other words, in order to get these services, you know, a world-class grocery store, if you will, world-class insurance, world-class medical care, etc., there's going to have to be an infusion of capital to make that even possible. You see, so you know, it's very easy to say, but actually making that happen will take a vast investment.
Interesting point. But believe it or not, this is an age-old model. If you visit any agricultural city, you'll see that they barter, they network, they form business relationships, but they also have relationships that are outside the community. When you hear about the deficit, the trade deficit,
Right.
more products coming into our country than going out, more products coming into the state than going out, more products coming into the city than going out.
Gross national product or gross city product, gross, this is really gross domestic product. This is really interesting because, once again, With the services that you list here, those services generally are in the city, but people make the excuse as if someone else's services are better. Maybe there is a world-class insurance facility in Gary, Indiana, in Hammond, Indiana, but people choose not to use it because it's in Gary. Maybe you can get a nice suit in Gary. And so I think people, once again, going back to your point, people have to be re-educated.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, why would someone leave their city when they can get it right there in the city? That's self-hatred, but that's bigger than that. They have to be educated. And see, this is a really interesting thing. I look at the bills I look at the checks that I write to businesses throughout my monthly bills. And when you look at the return address, it's generally outside of your state even. Not even the city, but the state. The question becomes, can I find someone who can provide this service in my city? That requires education.
And let's look at it even a little bit further. If in the event we can't find someone within our city to offer comparable service, we can let the recipient of our dollars become familiar with where we're at educationally, in the sense that, give you an example, with auto insurance, if we increase our deductible, it lowers our premium. If we begin to do things that can hurt you on the books, it can hurt a company's profit and loss, then one would raise an eyebrow and say, what's going on there?
Right.
Maybe we need to move there.
Right.
So if we can influence those that are watching us, if we can't create the service, we can influence the company that owns the service to come make their home, Northwest Indiana or Gary, Indiana.
Because we're still giving out $14 million a week or per month in no interest loans.
What's the #1 export of the city of Gary?
Money. We got about 3 minutes left. We're going to go through a tour de force here with you. Could you please explain to our audience the rule of 72?
The rule of 72 is a quick and simple rule by Einstein, created by Einstein. You take 72, you divide it by any years that you need for your money to double, and whatever that equals, that's the percent, or that's the annual yield you should look for in using your money. Or you can take it the other way around, take 72, the rule of 72, take 72 and divide it by the interest rate, and whatever you get will tell you how many years it would take, approximately how many years it would take for your money to double.
Interesting. Okay, I'm loving this. And see, once again, do children get that in 10th grade? Generally, no, because economic classes aren't a necessity. This is really a shame.
They're not geared to empowering the children economically. They're not geared to educating children to actually operate as a real player in the fiduciary world.
Because people are taught to be consumers as opposed to accumulators of money.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to talk with you about is, and we've got very little time here, but we've got all these beautiful calculators spread out here. We got the big HP here. We got this calculator. You were talking about cheap calculators and how they only have a certain number of digits. Explain this.
Well, as you can see, the rich tends to, this is a very cheap calculator, and it's 8 digits. If I only give you 8 digits to work with, you tend to stay within the confine of those 8 digits.
Right.
Whereas if you look at a calculator, it doesn't necessarily have to be this big, or a computer, you have more digits to work with. And so when one is explaining financial literacy or economics, and if a person is confined to an 8-digit calculator, they can't conceive what $182 million could do.
Right.
So we need to get them to begin to embrace the tools that can help validate the vision or the possible vision of realizing the things that we hope for.
So most people's limitations of money is self-imposed.
Correct.
Self-imposed and imposed by the limitations of a calculator that has very few digits. Teddy, Ken, final comments. We got just a few seconds.
Ken, it's the most vital issue in the black community that you're discussing right now, and you keep up the good work with that.
Thank you. I would say to the viewers, listen, read, and test the waters.
Yes. We want to thank you all for joining us on The Big Picture with Kenneth White, Executive Director of the Marshall Plan for Cities, joined by my co-host, Teddy McClendon from McClendonReport.com. We thank you all for joining us, and you manage your money and have a good evening.